Hey guys, it's Selwen here, and today let's talk about the holy boy himself, the Paladin, specifically the Retribution spec, which has also suffered some positive changes. Retribution was one of those specs in Legion that was rather, how can I be nice about this, boring as shit. And yet, that is subjective. In fact, I could have some fun with it once I acquired the proper Legos and stuff, especially the Talent Ring to get those extra procs from Divine Purpose. And the aesthetics of it also helped, but we cannot deny that the Legion Retri was quite bland and stale in terms of its gameplay. Now, it has suffered some changes. The biggest one is probably the change on your judgment mechanic, and no more classes smash wannabe nonsense and the making of Blade of Wrath talent proc to be baseline. So on that alone is great, and then there's also other big changes on your talents, like the comeback of Inquisition. But in general, it still is quite a simple spec, but I'm happy to say that it does indeed play better and your talents don't have so many set and forget choices. It's not perfect, it does have some issues, but it's better than in Legion. So let's take a look at your main abilities. As for artifact stuff, your main ability stayed as a talent, but as for the rest is mostly gone. Now, first on here we get our classic cooldown, Avenging Wrath, which was slightly changed. Instead of a flat damage increase, is now at 20%, so it's a little bit lower, but also improves your healing and critical strike chance. Mostly the same, but crits are fun, right? And what I don't mention, by the way, is because the abilities have stayed the same, alright, just to save us some time. So Divine Storm is mostly the same. We now get a bigger new animation, which is also bigger in radius, so it's not just an aesthetic change. And the reason for that is that we lost our traits, and we had a few that boosted Divine Storm heavily, especially the one that made it travel for a couple yards forward and did some extra damage like a duplicate. This change kinda makes up for it, while still staying very much Divine Storm-ish. Then on here we get our Judgment. Now Judgment, instead of just being this damaging window for your spenders, it only applies a single debuff to increase the damage of your next spender by 25%, and that's it, just one, plus generates one holy power on top. This is just a great change overall. The old Judgment just punished you so hard for target switching, and almost permanent damaging windows are not fun. It really didn't add anything to the spec. You had it up basically all the time. There was barely any planning besides delaying it sometimes, and that was it. And in turn, you just got brutally punished when you target switched and had Judgment on cooldown. With this change, there is still some planning, not much, but some, like aiming at Judgment with Avenging Wrath and some other cooldowns, or I can imagine trinkets as well. But for the most part, is use it on cooldown, making one of your many Templar's Verdicts or Divine Storms do more damage to that same target. Isn't very awe-inspiring, but at least isn't the Legion version, and the holy power provided helps keeping the flow of the spec going as well, and adds something else to Judgment on itself. Then on here, and yes, I know what you're thinking, Hammer of Wrath, but hold on to your pants, because yes, it is a talent, and yes, it is on a crap spot. I know, but it's not all that bad. Then you get Templar's Verdict, and it's the same, you just get a slight twist on the animation. You now get this sort of wings on it, which is rather cool. And then passives is where you also get your new goodies. Art of War, your auto attacks have a chance to reset the cooldown of your Blade of Justice, so yeah, basically like the Blade of Wrath talent. But that said, the talent is still present, but more on that in a bit. And then you get your new mastery, since Judgment was revamped. Now it's just a flat damage increase to your overall holy damage. So things like your spenders and Judgment and Hammer of Wrath. Crusader Strike and Blade of Justice is physical though. Now, these changes make your overall gameplay a little bit more interesting. Again, still rather simple, but between your proc and the building and dumping of holy power can keep you decently engaged, if this is the style of play that you enjoy. But of course, talents improve it a little bit more, so let's talk about them. So on the first tier we get Righteous Verdict. Using Templar's Verdict will increase the damage of your next Templar's Verdict by 15% on a 6-second buff. Just a damage increase, not much to it, primarily for single target as you're not going to be using as many Templar's Verdicts in AoE, and this was essentially your legendary cloak. Then you get Zeal, which is an easy, don't have to think about it much choice. Zeal now empowers your judgments to empower you with a Holy Zeal, making your next 3 auto attacks 50% faster and deal some holy damage. It's a passive, so it's like whatever. That said, the benefit of it comes to the Art of War proc. As you attack faster, you get a higher chance. And out of the two, probably works best in AoE as you don't have to change your rotation for it. I mean, Templar's Verdict will be almost useless on those situations, so I might as well get that Zeal damage. And finally, you get your Execution Sentence, which is feeling a little bit weird. It costs 3 holy power, deals pretty heavy holy damage, so benefits from mastery, and leaves a debuff increasing all of your holy damage to the target by 20% on a 30-second cooldown for 12 seconds. So this is here to increase your burst primarily, and essentially works like a Colossus Smash again. And in general, I'm not really feeling it. Like, sure, there is synergy with it. You can get it with Hammer of Wrath, which is usable during your Avenging Wrath window and is holy damage. Then you can take Crusade to make your Avenging Wrath better, and then combo the sentence with the last 12 seconds of Crusade or something for the highest benefit, so when you are at the high stacks of Crusade. Or you can simply combo with a Judgment and a Sentence for a bigger Templar's Verdict outside of those big cooldowns. The problem is just the cost of Execution Sentence. The 3 holy power feels quite a lot to use, unless you take a Wake of Ashes, which is your artifact ability essentially, just to get more holy power in general, but the cooldowns don't really align, but helps. And yeah, the talent works during those cooldowns for bigger bursts. Outside of them, it just feels a little bit clunky. I mean, you just be comboing with Judgments for 40-45% bigger Templar's Verdict, but the holy power cost is really not making it for me. It just feels a little bit clunky, again, in my opinion. Now, in the second tier, you get your new Blade of Wrath, which just increases the frequency of the Art of War procs by 100%, so doubling it, and increases the Blade of Justice damage by 25%. Now, giving it baseline, just like I said previously, yes, it helped tremendously, as you were blindly picking it in Legion, simply because it was the best for numbers and made your gameplay overall more engaging, which is so much worse than the numbers reasoning, and just made the spec more fun on that proc alone. And now you don't feel like you have to take it as much. That said, it still feels quite powerful, but in turn made the proc more meaningful. But personally, I feel like I actually have options on this tier, and I'm not forced on that path, which is cool. Now, Hammer of Wrath here caused some controversy in the beginning of beta and alpha, because Hammer of Wrath was and still is sort of one of the most iconic abilities of the Paladin. It's basically like an execute, only usable at 20% of HP or during your Avenging Wrath window or the Crusade. Now, putting it as a talent, not gonna lie, it kinda hurts, but when you look at the other talents, you will understand why, as it will create this build or synergy with the other talents to go on this very bursty approach and very much based on cooldowns, much to what I said with Execution Sentence. As for the Blade of Wrath choice, kinda goes to a more, let's just say, sustained and not so much based on your CD windows. That said, when numbers are all said and done, might make all of this irrelevant and you will finally see what is the best choice, if there's actually one, but I'm just talking about how it feels at this point in time. All of that said, Hammer of Wrath also feels great to use in dungeons, as you can use it quite frequently to execute trash mobs, which is quite fun. Plus keeps your holy power going for each subsequent trash packs. Then you also have Fires of Justice, reducing the Crusader Strike cooldown by 15% and gives it a 15% chance to make your next Holy Power spender to cost 1 less Holy Power. Overall, it works fine. The other choices do feel better, but can provide you with more Templar's Verdicts or Divine Storms, or even Execution Sentences, since it's also a spender. But this mostly works better for Divine Storms, especially during dungeons, to build towards them quicker, and also creates some synergy with the new Divine Judgment talent or even Divine Purpose, but more on that in a bit. Then on here is the same as in Legion, but Fists of Justice now reduce the cooldown of Hammer of Justice from Holy Power spent, not from Judgments. I'm not sure if that was the way in Legion, I don't quite remember, but that's that. Then on the next tier you get your AoE talents-ish, because you get your artifact ability on here, Wake of Ashes, still damaging in cleave, dealing pretty high damage, still doing the stun on demons or undeads, and the slow, plus generates the 5 Holy Power on a 45-second cooldown. Now you can technically, yes, take this as an AoE burst option. However, taking AoE aside is still gonna feel like a must for a single target. Either you're going to the bursty CD-based gameplay that I said before, or with the Inquisition that I'm gonna talk next. The 5 Holy Power is just too good to give up, especially when you compare with the other options like Consecration, which now actually works pretty well for AoE. It's just on a 20-second cooldown, deals pretty decent damage, plus gives 1 Holy Power. So for dungeons and stuff works rather well, and it's my favorite in fact, but when you compare with Holy Power provided, I mean, it's not even a contest. Wake of Ashes just brutalizes Consecration in that way. Then there is Divine Judgment, which is kind of weird and interesting at the same time. Weird in the sense that it's not really providing Holy Power like the others. Plus, even though it benefits and should be used when AoEing, the outcome of the damage isn't really focused on AoE. So basically what it does is, for every target that you hit with a Holy Power spender, you gain a stacking damage buff to your Judgment. Stacks 15 times 20% per hit or per stack. So in single targets, it's mostly worthless. You're gonna stack it like 3 or 4 times before you do an actual Judgment. In AoE, however, your Divine Storm is gonna stack it pretty high, depending on the mob count, which will then lead to really big Judgment hits. That said, Judgment is a single target ability, so where this talent seems to be focused on is on fights where you're gonna have adds, but still have a priority target or a boss. So think High Command, right? You're gonna Divine Storm a lot there, so you would stack this buff quite fast, which would then lead to really big Judgments on the boss. On there or fights like that, I can see it working rather well, but that's a very niche area. It also works in dungeons obviously, and in terms of sustain works well as it's always present as opposed to the other choices which do have cooldowns. Now, there is synergy in order to make this talent more effective. One is the Fires of Justice, where you can reduce the cost of your spenders, meaning you will be able to stack it faster and higher if the RNG gods bless you. The other is Divine Purpose, which also is an RNG proc, but getting free Divine Storms to use means stacking that buff high again. And the Fires of Justice makes you use spenders more quickly due to Holy Power cost, so all of that mixed can really benefit these talents. So on that, it's cool, we'll just come down to numbers stuff again, and hell, you can even time an execution sentence for an even bigger judgment. So in theory, all of that kinda sounds cool and interesting, just works a little bit weird in practice, and you do have that RNG component if you are going on that path. And then on this tier is basically the same as in Legion, so not much to see. Next is also kinda the same as in Legion, you just get Selfless Healer now, Holy Power spending abilities, stack a buff, reducing the cast time of Flash of Light by 25% and increasing the healing by 10% for 4 times, granting you an instant cast Flash of Light essentially, which is neat. The others are mostly the same here, just different icons and whatnot. And then on the final tier you get some talents which I already went over, but you have the Divine Purpose. Abilities that consume holy power have a 15% chance to make the next one free and deal 20% more damage. So it's a proc, essentially another one. So with this talent you're gonna get quite RNG heavy, as you're gonna get 2 procs to play with. I personally like it though, as it keeps you a bit more engaged in what you're doing, making things overall more interesting and fun, and also seems to be the clear winner for dungeons or AoE. I mean, Crusade is just burst, which is nice, but in dungeons, unless you're just focusing on bosses, isn't going to be all that useful, most of the time anyway. And Inquisition is just a buff that you need to keep up, granting 8% more damage and haste, lasts for 15 seconds or more per holy power used, up to 3. This in dungeons just felt awful to keep up between trash packs, hence my saying of Divine Purpose seems to be your go-to. The way that dungeons work, going from trash pack to trash pack and just trying to keep up the buff, it's really quite clunky. I forgot it most of the time as well. Obviously you can use auras and stuff like that to keep you on track. Inquisition just feels like it gets in a way. Now Inquisition on itself for things like a single target, it's alright, in the end it's just a buff for you to keep up. Kinda reminds me of something like Slice and Dice from Rogues. You just have to keep in mind you're off the timer and your resources, and you're just gonna get overall more damage, and the haste does help your overall gameplay since your abilities cooldowns do benefit from haste. You also get the old Vengeance effect on your hands, if anyone remembers that from way back when. I got a little bit nostalgic of it, to be honest, but yeah, with this talent you probably want to combo with things like Righteous Verdict. Execution Sentence feels awful here, as you're gonna need way too much holy power, it's just gonna feel overly clunky. And then Blade of Wrath for just more Blade of Justices, and so for more holy power to keep that flow going, especially since you're gonna need holy power, some extra holy power to keep up Inquisition. And then Wake of Ashes for just on-demand holy power to go in for bursts and stuff like that during your cooldown windows. But in general, keeping it up and activating it won't change too much of your rotation. Now Crusade is the bursty option, like I said before. It replaces your Avenging Wrath, you call upon the lights and begin a crusade, increasing your damage and haste by 3% for 25 seconds, up from 20 from Avenging Wrath, up to 10 times per holy power spent to 30% damage and haste increase. So each Templar's Verdict or Divine Storm is gonna stack it 3 times. In general, the stacks now are much faster to stack up, but you still have to plan your way around it to get it faster. Simple stuff, but like only popping it when you add 5, then using Wake of Ashes to stack it faster, and etc. What's cool about Crusade is the haste, as it basically gives you a Bloodlust at max stacks. So you get this super fast playstyle when you pop it. Combine this with Hammer of Wrath for even more burst, and you're just gonna be seeing a lot of numbers, a lot of big numbers, which can be fun in that way. Plus you still have that Execution Sentence synergy to use when you have max stacks of Crusade, like I talked about previously. Just keep in mind that taking Crusade, you are giving up 20% crit chance from Avenging Wrath though. But basically you can go for Crusade for more damage and a haste as a cooldown, or Inquisition, giving the same but at lower numbers, but stays as a permanent buff, and you can keep your Avenging Wrath. So you're basically choosing between sustain and burst kind of thing. And you still have your Divine Purpose as the more RNG focused choice, but does seem to work better for AoE and not as reliable for a single target. That said, there is that 20% damage increase on top, and it's great with Righteous Verdict, but then after that you're just gonna be praying for procs at the right moments, especially during things like your Avenging Wrath window. But I'll guess all of that we'll have to see when we get to live and see all the numbers to see what's worth and what's not, but taking that aside, all options feel great on this tier. So yeah guys, that covers the new Retribution Paladin in BFA. And again, it's not something out of this world, but if you got bored of it in Legion or you were disappointed with it, I would tell you right now to give it another shot. It does indeed play better. It's still mostly the same at its core level, but talents are better now, with much fewer must-have choices. The judgment window crap is gone, so on that alone makes it worthwhile to play, if you don't mind overly simple playstyles. You do really look cool doing it, though, you cannot deny that. Retribution in general, still a very cool looking melee class. On top, you still get all of your utility as well, like your blessings, a CC if you wish, a stun, a slow, a dispel, and of course, great survivability as well. And needless to say, your bubbles, which can be so useful. And there's nothing like benefiting from dying teammates for extra damage, so just make sure to bring some enhancement shamans and you're gonna get that buff up quite nicely. But the big con here still seems to be your mobility. Besides, your little RC still gets quite slow, just like the old decay, but hey, class fantasy, right? Anyway guys, do let me know what you all think of BFA's Retribution Holy Boy. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to get more better videos, and check out my Patreon if you wish to support the channel. As always, thank you for watching, have a fantastic day everyone, and I'll see you all next time. See ya!